Fist of the North Star Shimpan no Sosei Kengo Ratsuden is essentially a 2D fighter that is based upon the anime and covers the story of the first series. Kenshiro, the ever-wondering stoic warrior and practitioner of one of the most deadliest martial art forms on the planet, wanders the wastelands of what used to be Earth in search of his fiancée and the man responsible for the 7 scars on his chest. The narrative that's presented naturally pales in comparison to the source material, but what it gets right has to be the gameplay. Being developed by the same guys behind Guilty Gear, the controls are as tight and responsive as you would expect, and thanks to the huge roster of characters, there's plenty of different styles to try out as well. Each of them are just as fun as they are varied, and all offer up a collection of basic attacks, as well as a series of special abilities which are unique to each fighter. To perform these abilities during fights, you need to use Aura, which has 2 levels and is represented by first blue, then gold status bars. When filled to the max, you can perform a deadly fist blow, which is similar to the instant kill moves from Guilty Gear. Unfortunately, there's not that much in the way of longevity, as the game doesn't really offer up that many unlockables or extra modes. It's bound to turn some players off, but for fans of the series, this is quite possibly one of the best games to ever come out of the franchise. Code Age Commanders is an action RPG that introduces us to the world of 4 protagonists that you follow throughout the adventure. Their planet is built upon something known as the Central Code, which every 10,000 years reinvents itself, but as a consequence it destroys all life on the globe. The journey picks up towards the end of one of these cycles, with our heroes searching for a way to ultimately stop the process once and for all. Now the game is split up into a series of missions that all require you to fight enemies known as Coded. By doing so, you'll open up the map and ultimately locate a boss that must be defeated in order to advance. This is where the surprisingly intricate battle system comes into play. It's all presented in real time, with the player taking control of one of the characters and your allies being handed off to the AI. Now you have a series of combos you can perform, as well as various defensive maneuvers like dashing, guarding and countering that form the basis of the pretty robust system. All of your actions are beholden to a gauge that slowly depletes with each move you make, and a third gauge that allows you to perform a code drive attack. After dealing enough damage, these abilities can then be performed, which light up the screen in style and play out in a truly cinematic fashion. Over time you'll unlock more of them as you level up, with each of them becoming ever more useful than the last. If you're a fan of the genre and don't mind the language barrier, Code Age Commanders is well worth giving a go. Gantz is a game that is widely based upon the source material that surrounds it. It features all of the characters from the popular series and follows the events of the manga to a T. It's essentially a third-person shooter, with the player being tasked with taking out an ever-growing threat that's plaguing the populace. Now unfortunately there's no translation available, but it can be enjoyed without a knowledge of the language, as the gameplay is pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. You take up the role of Kurano, and have a range of options when it comes to the disposing of enemies. First off, you have a standard pistol that can slow the advance of your target with a special shot, but you also have a samurai sword, which is the main weapon you'll find yourself using. The basic swing will deal with lesser enemies, but once you've taken enough out and built your gauge, you'll be able to execute a series of special abilities that obliterate anything in your way. This isn't the only skill you have access to. There's another that allows you to utilize several objects within the environment, such as cars or dumpsters that can be lobbed at enemies and deal out devastating amounts of damage. This one comes in handy during the variety of boss fights you'll encounter throughout the adventure, with most of them being some of the more challenging aspects to the game. Like I said, for somebody who doesn't understand the language, you'll probably not get the most out of Gantz. Metal Slug has always been well known as one of the premier side-scrolling shooters to come out of SNK, and for a long time it was a staple of the arcade scene. It's exactly what a classic side-scroller should be, challenging and fun. But as you would expect, when the 3D outing was announced, expectations were pretty low. But upon playing Metal Slug 3D, it's clear the same love and care the series has always received was also applied to the transition. Now the main difference between this and the originals is that there isn't much platforming this time around. Sure, you'll find yourself jumping here and there to obtain items, but it's not as integral to the overall experience. Another change saw a lock-on feature, which made taking on the huge variety of enemies all the more easier. But it did take away some of the difficulty you often associate with the series. In no way is it a deal breaker, and to be honest, it was a necessary trade-off for the new perspective. The biggest change in the game, however, is actually the metal slug system. Throughout each mission there are hidden discs that you can find from either prisoners or boxes, and obtaining these will allow more parts to be made for your metal slug. You can customize various parts, such as its armor type, wheel type, gun and cannon to your liking, and when you're in a stage where there is one available, it will be customized to the way you had it before you start the stage. It's a pretty neat inclusion and leads to a lot more replay value as you search for all of the parts available. If you're a fan of the series, you owe it to yourself to try this one out. VibRipple is a sort of spiritual successor to an often overlooked PlayStation 1 game, VibRibbon. If there was a short way to describe it, it would have to be pure fucking madness. Just like the original, you once again take up control of the wired-framed rabbit Vibri and are tasked with completing a series of levels that require you to extract certain color-coded objects from increasingly elaborate photographs. Much like the surface of a trampoline, each of the photographs are elastic in nature, which allow Vibri to bounce around and possibly shake loose the objects you desire. Of course, in keeping with the challenge, that's providing you've chosen the right part of the picture to bounce on. The key is to zone in on a specific part of the picture that corresponds with the colour you're looking for. It's all very confusing at first, and you'll soon wonder to yourself, did the creator perhaps forget his meds when making the game? But for all its weirdness, there's a solid experience lying beneath, although not without its flaws. Due to each objective being colour-coded using the basic PS2 palette, it can often be quite confusing trying to distinguish the exact colour you're looking for. This will no doubt result in continually bouncing around and will likely piss some people off. But if you have some patience with the game, it is something that can be put aside. Now, one of the best inclusions was the ability to import your own photos to bounce upon. All you needed was a hard drive, and you could bounce on your loved ones, pets, and of course for the more dirty-minded, a string of never-ending laughs. In my opinion, it's nowhere near as good as the first game, but VibRipple does offer up a compelling experience for those looking for something completely unique. When it comes to shooters, the PS2 was home to a wide range of games that made it one of the best places to be for fans of the genre. Ibarra is another great example from Cave, who are well known when it comes to quality shooters, and in no way does it disappoint. One of the first things you'll notice is the rather strange setup with all of the bosses being women, and the player taking up the role of one of two males, and from what I can tell, it depicts a theme of the two genders waging war against each other. For all its quirks when it comes to narrative though, Ibarra absolutely nails its gameplay and presents one of the most difficult but at the same time rewarding shooters on the system. In total, there are 6 levels to power through, and thanks to a string of power-ups and abilities, taking on the onslaught of enemies is made all the more manageable. The power-up system is somewhat similar to another great shooter by the name of Battle Guerrilla, meaning that picking up enough of the small bullet icons transfers them into a bomb, and it's possible to stockpile them and save them for the much more challenging boss fights. At times these bosses can take up the entire screen, and are all beautifully designed both visually and mechanically, with the player having to conjure up strategies on the fly in order to bring them down. As with most shooters, there's a nice amount of variety when it comes to the different modes you can play. You have Arcade, which offers infinite continues, and then Arranged, which is a much more challenging affair. The best thing about it is that a second player can jump in on the action, which makes this game perfect for couch co-op. If you're looking for a solid shooter on the PS2, Ibarra is a great option. The Buster Groove series has long been one of the better collection of rhythm games out there, but one entry that often gets overlooked is Dance Summit 2001. Obviously it never found its way out of Japan, which is a huge factor, but also the more casual nature of the game may have played a role. First off, visually everything looks great. The character models flow with precision, which is a result of the excellent digital motion capture for each dancer. The backgrounds are filled with eye candy and offer up a diverse amount of locations, from the dance halls of downtown to the athletic stadium and back alleys that accompany each routine. Now, gameplay is where Dance Summit truly comes into its own. If you're at all familiar with these types of games, you already know what to expect. A series of button presses appear on the screen, with the player having to mimic the inputs that are presented. These range from simple combinations to downright infuriating strings that are bound to test players. Now, it never quite reaches the difficulty of past games, but it does offer enough challenge to keep you coming back for more. One of the finest aspects though has to be the inclusion of an insane amount of replay value. There's a literal ton of secret stages and teams to unlock, as well as several new dancing styles that make playing through the game all the more rewarding upon completing it. Although it's nowhere near the best in the series by any means, if you're a fan of the franchise, this one deserves a go. The King of Fighters is SNK's flagship fighting game franchise that has been ongoing for over 15 years and is still going strong to this day. Now, Unlimited Match is essentially a remake of the original 2002 version and offers up many new inclusions such as better visuals, balancing, as well as several new mechanics that ultimately makes it the best version of the game. The most impressive has to be the roster of 66 characters. All of them possess a set of basic moves from low kicks to high punches, but what helps each of them stand out are the unique special abilities that they all possess. Mixing all of these attacks together is the name of the game, and building up combos is a surefire way to gain victory. With so much variety on offer, just making your way through each character is half of the fun, and ultimately settling upon a few that play to your advantage. Veterans of the original 2002 should be able to jump right back in with the skills that they already have. This one has got a bit of a silver lining though. Thankfully, the game did eventually make it to the West. Obviously not on the PS2, but actually quite recently on the PlayStation 4. So if you're looking to grab a copy, it's now widely available on the PlayStation Network and will not break the bank. Steam Boy is a game that's based on the anime of the same name. It comes from Akira creator Otomo-san and is set in an alternative Victorian England. The first aspect that will strike many are the incredible visuals that are presented in a sort of cel-shaded fashion, and although it does hold its frame rate, there's often a few dips when the action heats up, but it's nothing that takes away from the overall quality of the game. During play, you don't have direct control over the camera, and it's instead handled by prefixed angles that may have the potential to obscure some of the action. It can be a bit frustrating at first, especially during combat, but it won't take long to get used to the old school setup, and you'll soon be flooring your adversaries with a sort of steam gun that becomes your main means of defense. Now, the game is largely split up into exploration, combat, and a series of tasks, with most of them requiring you to complete several puzzles. At first, the language barrier can be an issue, but most of them are quite straightforward and won't completely stun your progression. The real star of the show though are the boss fights, which make for some of the most challenging parts of the game. If you're at all a fan of the source material, there's plenty on offer here that warrants a purchase, but for those that may not be accustomed to the anime, the rather simplistic and at times admittedly frustrating aspects of the experience might turn you off. Kamiwaza is a game that is built around stealth. As the player, you take on the role of a thief and scour the estates of the upper class in the hopes of scoring enough loot to help your sister who is fatally ill. Even though stealth plays a huge role, the player is never forced to play in a specific way. Obviously, you are rewarded for taking a more quiet approach, but running in and taking on everything the game throws at you also has its merits. Throughout each environment, a series of items will appear on the map that all offer a higher amount of currency to the player. The more items you acquire in the field results in your bag becoming larger and larger, and the best thing about it is that the bag itself can be used as a weapon to take on enemies. There's a clear level of humour present within the game, and it goes a long way in creating a somewhat charming atmosphere that really helps Kamiwaza excel. It won't be for everyone, but if you're fond of the likes of Tenchu or Shaolin, it offers up one of the most enjoyable adventures on the PS2. Well, that does it for today's video. If you're not subscribed yet, make sure to hit that button and help me reach my goal of 50k by the end of the year. Don't forget to hit the bell button either, as YouTube is a bit finicky when it comes to subscriptions. You can follow me on all of the socials to stay up to date on future videos and to take part in giveaways as well. You can also join our growing community on Discord and meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to our Patreon supporters Rhino, Skill Jim, Nano, Steve and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining our Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find the links in the description. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'll catch you next time.